So our next speaker is a retired math, Phys Ed, history teacher, and basketball coach from Caro Community Schools in the thumb part of Michigan. We won't hold that against him. The home to the largest number of wind turbines in the state. Originally, he was somewhat pro-wind until he was asked to look into it. He has worked with numerous Michigan townships and counties, helping with the writing of protective wind ordinances to protect the residents and minimize the chance of a lawsuit from wind companies. Please welcome Norm Stevens.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. I like your yellow shirts, but I like mine better. You got to get that on film. Everything they said is true. Those ladies, the nearest wind turbine, this isn't on my sheet here, the nearest wind turbine to my house, if the project had been completed, would have been about 1.5 miles approximately. I would have been gone the second that might have been approved, or the wind ordinance. If the wind ordinance was weak enough and had been approved, I would have been gone. 1.5 miles is going to affect my property value. I don't care what any Apex agent, NextEra agent, Invenergy agent. In our area, it's DTE, which was formerly Detroit Edison, or Consumers Energy. I don't care what they say. Anybody that's involved in real estate knows that it's location, 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 and nobody has ever walked into a real estate agency, as far as I know, and said, I want you to find me a house as close as possible to the tallest wind turbine in the community. The closer the better, and I'll go above asking price. That's never happened. I am not a township official, nor am I a county official. I have no desire to do so. I've never had that desire. I was asked to run for a board position. I was asked to take a planning commission position, if that would be possible. I said, that's a big no. I want no desire. Teachers would, as a retired teacher, but when I first started, the other teachers would ask me if I wanted to be on the negotiating team. I said, you don't understand. I want no part of politics. And here I am, basically doing just that. According to an Apex character assassination piece in Montcalm County, that's where I'm helping people right now in Michigan. They wrote a letter to the editor in a Michigan newspaper last April that, first of all, housewives are like this, I'm just a gym teacher, just like a woman is just a housewife. I'm sure you appreciate that. Apex, of course, forgot to mention that I taught math, history, and career education for 35 years. And then I've advised, about 20 townships, give or take a couple, draft their wind ordinances since 2017. The Apex rep also said that I'm not an expert. I don't know if I would call myself an expert, because an 8th grader told me that years ago. Somebody I had in my math class, he sat up nice and close to my desk. He was a good kid, but he, too much of this. And he said, hey, Mr. Stevens, do you know? And I said, wait a minute. Excuse me, what did you ask me? Did you ask me, Mr. Stevens, if I know? Let me tell you something, son. I know everything. And what I don't know, my brother knows. And he looked up at me and said, you must have a very smart brother. So Apex telling me I'm not an expert, they're a couple of 35 years late. Most of my comments tonight will be about NextEra Energy. That's the company that came in and tried to install wind turbines in our community. They convinced our conflicted board members to draft a much weaker wind ordinance in 2016 that was supposed to replace a weak 2012 wind ordinance. They didn't like that 2012 ordinance. It was a little bit too strong for them, so they convinced the conflicted officials to adopt a weaker wind ordinance. My township, because it's going to be hard, I don't have any overheads here. But my township had to deal with a 2012 wind ordinance, a 2016 wind ordinance, and a 2017 wind ordinance. So if you're taking notes, that might help you understand this a little bit. After the pro-wind board members approved that weaker 2016 wind ordinance that was pushed by NextEra in the late summer of 2016, I organized a successful wind referendum campaign that put the kibosh on that 2016 wind ordinance. However, when NextEra realized that they were going to lose that referendum, they're not real stupid, they realized that they were going to lose, so they decided to file an application on that 2012 wind ordinance that they didn't like to begin with, because they knew that the 16 wind ordinance wasn't going to fly. Fortunately, during 2016, that was a presidential campaign, and that's when 4 of our concerned citizens members or group members were able to oust 4 pro-wind conflicted board members. We now had control of the board, and I am so thankful that all of this happened during that time. The new board members who were voted into office in late 2016 denied NextEra's wind development application for that weak 2012 wind ordinance. That's when the trouble began, because NextEra then sued our township. Okay, and I don't have this written down here, but to give you an idea, that 1.5-year long process cost our township out of our own pockets, even though we had insurance, but there's a reason for that. Cost us $100,000 out of our own pockets, but we had insurance, which covered about $200,000. So the lawsuit was $300,000. The reason that happened is the insurance company, insurance agents, it was almost like they might as well have had just picked up any 2 adults over there to help defend them. They understood law, but they knew nothing about wind. So we insisted that we keep our attorney, our law firm that was helping us in the township. He was the advisor, so to speak, and the insurance agents were the gophers. They're the ones that did all the paperwork and everything, but he's the one that, our attorney for our township, is the one that defended us in court. So that's why it still cost us $100,000. Because NextEra, when they sued us, they did lose badly in federal court in Bay City, Michigan. The judge used words, I love this, I had to run to Google to help me with these. The judge used words like surplusage and nugatory to define parts of their lawsuit. You guys can Google that, you got a phone, pull it out, see what you find. While NextEra's lawsuit was in progress, the new board approved a great wind ordinance again in 2017. And that's been used as a template in communities across the state. And just recently, in Neosho County, Kansas, a lady there said, excuse me, said, could you send me your township wind ordinance? We've heard about that before, but please send it to us. I sent that to them about 10 or 11 weeks ago, and within 2 months they adopted it by resolution. So our wind ordinance from Elmer Township in Michigan is basically now being used. But one big thing that they did was they changed the setback distance from 4 times the height to 6 times the height of the wind turbine. So that's nice. A wind representative in Michigan once said, "Judge us by our whole body of work." Okay, well, these are some examples of NextEra's body of work in Elmer Township, again, which is in the tip of the thumb. Michigan shaped like a glove. Anybody from Michigan says, well, I live here, or I live here by Mackham Island, or whatever. We are about 80 miles north of Detroit. These are things that NextEra did or did not do, or things that they said, that these are the things that got me fired up. Because I never went to township meetings until 2014 about some other issue. Everything was done properly. Why should I go? I had no concerns. First, a neighboring township of our Elmer Township in Michigan was also sued at the same time by NextEra. One of NextEra's wind representatives commented at their meeting 55 decibels isn't loud because Tuscola County, your county has 65 decibels. Well, that's all fine and dandy, except Tuscola County doesn't have a wind ordinance. And yet, there are 2 or 3 people that attended this meeting in Ellington Township. They don't know that. They're just being told this by this guy that's coming in that's going to make all kinds of money for them. The Elmer Township Planning Commission chairman asked a Nextera rep, thank you, asked a Nextera rep if he knew where wind turbines would be located. The representative said, well, I honestly can't say. I can't tell you that. Except the very next day on the FAA website, the location of every wind turbine for our community appeared on their webpage. One day later, but he didn't know. He said he honestly couldn't say. Nextera stated that they've only had 3 accidents, major accidents. This was back then. I don't know how many they've had since. They've only had 3 major accidents. I'm just getting started. I don't know what I'm doing. I've got an old dilapidated laptop. I'm tired. It's 3 o'clock in the morning, and it's the next day and the next day. I found 7, but they've only had 3. And we have them on video saying that. And they said it multiple times at multiple townships. That's what we had to deal with. But the conflicted people buy that hook, line, and sinker because they don't want to lose their money. In April of 2016, at probably a crowd about this size, the Planning Commission chair again asked, how much would it cost to decommission a wind turbine? Now, I don't know if anybody's ever looked that up, if you have any ideas, but he said it would cost $50,000 to tear down a 500-foot wind turbine. 50 grand. Now, 50 grand wouldn't come close then, and it wouldn't come close now. A few months later, this was probably December or January, Nextera was in trouble. They were losing more and more support. So, one of the wind representatives said at that meeting, same size, decommissioning 1 wind turbine would cost $675,000. They went from 50 grand to $675,000 in a matter of a handful of months. How can that go from 50 grand to 675,000? Well, you just have to trust the wind company. At the Elmer Township public hearing in November of 2016, Nextera said they were in compliance with all 25 provisions of the wind ordinance. Hang on, I need a drink of water. They said they were in compliance with all 25 provisions. The Concerned Citizens Group, Spicer Engineering, 2 acousticians, which are sound experts, the Planning Commission, me, which meant nothing, the Board of Trustees, and then finally when Nextera sued us in federal court in 2017 and lost, the federal court judge also disagreed with Nextera. At one of the federal court hearings, this one really set, I think this was the turning point when I said I want no part of being on the board of the Planning Commission. I just want to go out and help people. At one of the federal court hearings, Nextera's attorney said, Judge, no one in the state uses LMAX as part of their sound description or sound restrictions to measure sound levels. All right, let me explain what LMAX is. LMAX is a maximum sound level. If the wind ordinance says sound shall not exceed 45 decibels LMAX, if it's 46 decibels, they're not in compliance. Okay? Can't do it. But if you don't have that, it's subject to interpretation. And I won't get into that right now. Maybe this gentleman here can talk about it. I won't get into that right now. But in any case, Judge, no one in the state uses LMAX to describe that. At that time, I'm not allowed to bring a phone into the courtroom, but I could have raised my hand. I'm a teacher and I'm used to this kind of stuff. I would have said, Judge, I've got the names phone numbers, contacts, and the names of the townships, and I've already handed 4 wind ordinances to our attorney that used LMAX. And here's the largest wind company in the country telling, the judge is being told by their lead rep, or lead official, nobody uses it. I probably, if I spent more time researching this, I could come up with more than that. Here's some documentation that puts wind companies on notice that opposition to 600-foot tall wind turbines installed within 1,200 feet of homes is led by, and maybe most of you have heard this, some of you have heard it, I know this guy's heard it, the girls have heard it, I'm sure. You guys are a small, vocal minority. There are not very many of you. Nikayla even said, the wind company says, everybody wants these. Really? Well, that slogan, a small but vocal minority, is used across the country. Huron County, Michigan is located at the tip of the thumb part of the state of Michigan. They're north of us. It's the so-called thumbnail of Michigan. Huron County residents know what it's like to live by wind turbines because in 2017, they had as many wind turbines in their country, or excuse me, in their county as the rest of the state combined. They have right now about 475. I'm not sure exactly how many they had at that time. They've experienced the red flashing lights, the audible sound, the inaudible sound, the shadow flicker, and all of those wind turbines that inundate their landscape. They sent wind packing on May 2nd, 2017, and they did so in a landslide. So much for, you know, don't I guess I'm telling you, don't buy any surveys or polls, because those can be doctored and asked in certain ways that favor them. Go by actual voting results. So there's one voting result, and I'm getting to that. There were 3,000 people that voted. 1,900 voted against those weak wind ordinances. 1,100 people voted in favor. So yeah, but that's 63% to 37%. That's another landslide. And that's despite the fact that DTE, Detroit Energy, and NextEra spent $875,000 advertising, and the residents spent $3,700. Imagine if those numbers had been flip-flopped, what the result would have been. And the residents still prevailed. Why? Is that surprising? Is that unusual? Well, that's just one county. That wouldn't happen anywhere else. Okay. In Michigan, a wind referendum can only occur after, as far as I know, this guy will correct me, can only occur after a township approves a wind ordinance. There have been 24 wind referenda in Michigan since 2009. 24. And a weak wind ordinance has been turned down all 24 times. It's not 15 out of 24, it's not 20 out of 24. It's 24 out of 24 times. Weak wind ordinances have been defeated, and wind companies told, we don't want you here. That's not a small but vocal minority. I've already said this, but when there's an actual vote, not polls, taken for and by the urban elite, but an actual election in Michigan since 2009, wind loses. And it's usually by a 60 to 40% margin. That's not close. Last page. There are about 30 communities in Michigan that host wind turbines. And each one of these townships had conflicted officials on the Planning Commission or on the Board of Trustees when the wind developments were approved. This means that those officials or their close family members received a large direct financial benefit by approving a wind development. If you can find a community in Michigan that doesn't have conflicted officials, you won't find wind turbines. And lastly, because I'm a teacher, I'm going to give you guys a quiz. And don't tell me you ain't got no pencil, because I've heard that a million times. All right, where's my last sheet? I might have to borrow that thing there. Oh, it's here. All right, I'll use my Phys Ed voice. And don't screw around because I'll have you run a lap around the building. Take this sheet that most of you might have, if you would please. I'll give you a minute to find it. It won't take long. This is my last hurrah. When I'm done with this, I'm all done. Pretend you're folding this letter, this note, and you're mailing it, and cover up that first phrase. Cover it up so that you're only reading the bottom. Okay, so the bottom now says this is what you're looking at now at the very bottom. This is what Nextera said in their legal brief. This is what they said an acoustician at a meeting this size said. They're saying, this acoustician said, shall not exceed means Nextera can average the sound. That's what they said, our acoustician said. Open it up now, and you can read exactly what he said. He said, the acoustician said, it would be totally unacceptable to state that shall not exceed means Nextera can average the sound. In other words, you can't do that. But in their legal brief, this bottom part is what their attorneys put in their legal brief and handed it to a federal court judge. Thank you.
You're primarily, you were Michigan area, correct?
Yes.
And you may not know this, the teachers, you already know there's nothing wrong saying I don't. In your area, if they would have put one turbine down the line, what would the electric went through? My understanding, and I'm just getting educated on it, apparently when they put these in, the United States is built up into some three-letter thing, like PM, whatever, but that is in that district where that electricity can go. You know where Michigan was? So I was going to ask the same thing, and what do you
You'll correct me. I love this guy around. He tells me I'm doing things wrong all the time, just like that 8th grader. If you took, the best way I can explain this, and I don't know if this is exactly accurate, but this is close. If you took a 5-gallon pail of water and threw it in on the western part of Michigan into Lake Michigan, and then a year later, whatever, you went around and you tried to pick up some of that water out of the Detroit River, which eventually drains into Lake Erie. Is any of that water from that bucket that you put in on the other side of the state? Maybe, maybe not, probably not much. So where does that electricity go? We have no idea where each electricity molecule goes. That's all I can tell you, unless now another city might buy that electricity, but are they actually getting those electric little molecules that are being produced? Are they getting those electrons from your development or from my development in my town? I don't know if anybody can answer that.
And that's fine. Well, you already told me and gave me a good idea. Can the ladies from Missouri give us an idea where your electric goes from your turbine? Or where it's permitted to go, I think, the better way.
So I actually asked the grid operator this question because we heard a lot like, oh, we can control it or whatever, or it's going to, do this many homes. So they told me that it's the principle of something called Ohm's law. And like Norman was saying, once those electrons are on the transmission line, there's no control. They're on there, they go the path of least resistance. So typically that's more to like a more populated area, right, because they're using more electricity. But once they put that electricity on the line, that's it. They don't say, oh, like we're going to give this house coal, and we're going to give this house natural gas, or we're going to send nuclear to this town. It's all on there. It's a mix.
The only reason I was asking, because I've just asking questions a lot of people, because I like to research. When I asked about our turbines, the first question was, Crawford County, gonna get to keep any of the power that's in Ohio.
Sure.
No.
Sure.
Money is one thing, but are we gonna get these any benefits of electricity? Because we already know what brownouts, blackouts, and so on are previous experiences in California.
Yeah.
The first answer I heard from somebody, I'm not gonna give names or so on, was it's going to the East Coast. That's a big area. I did find another person talked to them that seemed to have a little more facts. And I just asked them the same question. And the response back was that it can go to anywhere in Ohio, but it also can go to Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Maryland, I think there's another state up east, Indiana, parts of Illinois, and West Virginia. So, but they have to keep, supposedly, and I haven't quite figured out how to keep these things molecule do it. But apparently by some sort of standard of regulation, that's where our power has to, but Ohio is not exclusive to it. That's all I was trying to find.
Thank you. We're going to kind of keep the questions for the end so we can get through everyone, because some of these questions, I think, are going to be answered in another presenter.
I just didn't want to lose.
Yep, no, that's fine.
Everybody going,
Yep. Thank you. So our next presenter is also from Michigan. He is from Deerfield Township, and he is a zoning administrator in Southeast Michigan. He is also the director of Interstate Informed Citizens Coalition and has testified on land use and energy policy issues in 10 states as well as Washington, D.C. Please welcome Kevin Martis.
Oh, these are dark days indeed when the fine people of Ohio have to turn to that state to the north. There was some kind of athletic contest in November, but I don't remember exactly how that turned out. But I can tell you I didn't bring that up when I spoke in Seneca County 3 years ago. Oh, it's getting real quiet now. Well, I wish I could say I'm glad to be here, but for me, I've been attending meetings like this since 2010. And it gets to be sad after a while. But I laud you for your courage and for your commitment to your communities. It's excellent that you're coming and taking the time to learn and to become engaged on this topic. When wind first showed up in my community, I was on a local planning commission, and I would say things are a little different in Ohio than in Michigan. In fact, Michigan is somewhat unique in that we have zoning and regulation of utility scale solar and wind still at the township level. Ohio had that up until 2007, and some folks were convinced that your average township is not equipped to deal with Fortune 500 companies, so they went to the state and asked for state control, state regulation, and that is in fact what happened. But I am proud to say that I worked behind the scenes with a committed group of folks from across the state who were successful in restoring to your county the right to determine your own land use future with respect to wind and solar. So you're blessed to have that opportunity back. If you look up Kevin Martis or Norm Stevens on the internet, it won't be too long until you find articles that tie us to the fossil fuel industry, to big tobacco, to big coal, to big oil. And so far we've been accused of being tied to everything except Sauron and the Dark Lords of Mordor. Apex is very busy in the middle of our state, and just like the article that targeted Norm, they've written an article later that said that my interstate coalition, which is nothing more than a bunch of folks like you who were formed when we were concerned about our county, our township, uses Nazi tactics and Gestapo-like deception to deceive people. In other words, everybody in the community thinks wind development is fantastic until a snake charmer like Norm or myself comes down and waves our magic wand, and suddenly you lose your ability to reason, and suddenly you can't think for yourselves, and suddenly you say, I thought these things were great, now I hate them, all because of Kevin Martis. Truth is, most of you don't know who I am, most of you, judging by your yellow shirts, already have serious concerns, and I had nothing to do with it. In fact, it's kind of insulting to say that a group of people are so stupid that a guy who's an obvious liar or a shill for the fossil fuel industry could come in, say a couple clever things, and suddenly like, wow, you know, that's ridiculous. The other thing I will say is that I've been able to trace back the origin of most of these stories about me to Apex. There's an outfit called the Checks and Balances Project that runs articles about me. And at first I thought they were a left-leaning news organization, but it turned out, when I looked into them, they are funded. Actually, their website says they take strategic direction from a PR group called TigerCom. And TigerCom lists among their clients Apex Clean Energy. So that Apex, whose PR group publishes these articles about me, then sends those articles to their host communities and say, look, even the press says this guy's a bad guy. Well, yeah, it's circular. I mean, how nice is that? It's unbelievable. I have no ties to the fossil fuel industry. In fact, I don't know any wind activists in the country that gets any fossil fuel money, and I don't know any that have even had it offered to them. Frankly, if they offered it to me, I would say no. I've worked hard to my 55 years, 56 next weekend, to develop independent means so that I can have my own freedom of conscience to live the way I like and to speak the way I like, and I would not take payment to give anybody else's agenda. So just so we're clear on that. Normally, I would be giving a zoning talk, and I have about a 50-minute to an hour-long zoning talk, but here it's not relevant because you don't get to set your own standards for wind development here. We worked in the state of Ohio, and I've testified in front of the Ohio legislature several times, going all the way back to 2012, to try and give you some more flexibility, but in the end, the state has seen fit to basically give you a thumbs up or thumbs down. So I don't need to give a lot of long, tedious talks about zoning and setback distances and all that stuff. You guys basically have a yes or no vote here. And you're fortunate to have that restored again. Because the other communities that were successful in protecting themselves from irresponsible wind development in Ohio had one thing in common. They've scraped together hundreds of thousands of dollars for extensive and long-term litigation ending up in the Ohio Supreme Court. And that's the only way that folks in Ohio have been able to protect themselves from some of these more predatory wind developers. Now you don't have to go through that, so you are very fortunate there. I want to share with you a quick story because when the wind developers came to my township, I was on the planning commission. And at first, in 2009, there were very few wind turbines anywhere in the Midwest, but there were a few in Michigan's thumb that we keep talking about. I mean, we've got to look foolish. Oh, I live up here, you know. But that's where the development was. I live right on the state line, just north of Toledo. I'm about 20 minutes from Toledo. But Norm lives 2.5, 3 hours from me. But we had to drive 3 hours to even see what wind turbines look like, and at that point, they were 390 feet tall. And I was a planning commissioner trying to do my research, and I thought, you know, I don't think they're great. It was not, if you go in the summertime, the odds of hearing turbines at their worst is pretty slim, particularly in July and August, because the wind doesn't blow strongly then. Spring, fall, night are your best times to hear it, blustery conditions. I said, but unless we get a lot of money for this, I don't see where this is really particularly good for our community. Then I came back home and started doing more research and got in connection with some folks who were living very near wind turbines. And I can tell you, I've heard testimony like Nikila and Carrie in 7 of the 10 states I've been in. Everybody that comes and talks is sharing the exact same kinds of experiences. So we put on a seminar in our gymnasium. We had about 300 people come from all over the state, because like solar is now, everybody's scrambling to understand utility scale solar where they're building 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 acres at a whack. Back then we were trying to learn our way around wind energy, so we brought in experts from around the country at our own expense to come and talk about this. We had a property value expert, an appraiser out of Chicago, my late friend Mike McCann. We brought in Robert Rand, an acoustician, who also testified with me in front of the legislature here in Ohio on noise issues all the way back to 2012. We brought these people in to do a seminar, but curiously, a couple from DeKalb, Illinois, named the Hulteens, wanted to come. They drove 5 hours each way in a snowstorm to speak at our event for free. They had 390-foot tall turbines near their house. And Stephanie wept as she talked about maybe one day having to move out of their house because of the noise. Also unannounced was a fellow named Kelly Alexander, who, if you've ever been to the Upper Peninsula, you see there's two small turbines right at the Mackinac Bridge. I think they're 300 foot, 290 foot. They were among the first ever built in the state. We didn't know he was coming. He drove down, walked onto the stage, drove, what was it, 4 or 5 hours in the same storm to say, I live by those turbines right there. Whatever you do, don't do it. They're 1,500 feet from my house. And they got in their cars and then they drove back home. And I got thinking, who would drive for free across the country in a snowstorm to lie to a group of people they've never met and then drive back home at their own expense? Nobody would. And these ladies didn't either. That's when I thought, we have got to take a much closer look at this. And I'll never forget, they played a video like you gals did that had iced rotor blades and the whistling noise. And our township clerk at the time said to Stephanie and to Dave, they told us when ice gets on the blade, they shut the turbines off. And she says, yeah, they told us that too. Then it registered. What's my point? When you're talking to a developer, you need to remember, you will never hear the truth from a person whose paycheck depends upon not knowing the truth. And it was in that same meeting that I came up with a phrase off the top of my head, and I've used it in my presentations ever since, and it's this. Nobody ever came to your planning commission meeting and said, the light coming through my windows is too steady. Could you make it flicker once a second? Nobody's ever come in and said it's too quiet outside my rural country home. Could you raise the noise level from 30 decibels to say 55? Nobody says our property values are too stable. Could you build some large industrial machines 1,500 feet from my bedroom window to place that property value at risk? Nobody says that. When I raise my hand and swear an oath of office as a planning commissioner, or I commit to work for communities as zoning administrator, my number one job is to protect the health, safety, and welfare of our citizens, not to advance the economic agenda of an outside corporation. And the experts from that corporation have sworn no such oath to protect your community. In fact, their oath forbids them from giving advice that's harmful to their company's bottom line. It would be a betrayal of their fiduciary obligation to their employers. But too often, officials who are not used to dealing with this stuff, and in my state, where we have some townships with 600 people being managed by a board of 5, they've never dealt with any kind of developer of any kind, ever. And now you have a Fortune 500 company beating on your door telling you your rights under the law and the things that you have to do to them. The stories that Norm told about the deceptions, we could go on all night. After a while, it looks like we're ganging up on them, but we're just explaining what actually happened in front of our own eyes. So it was a result of that seminar where people started calling me because they were desperate and hungry for information about wind energy development, and that's how I've ended up doing what I'm doing here tonight. So I will wrap this up. Like I say, I'm a little off script here because normally I have this much big PowerPoint presentation and so forth, but these ladies and Norm have covered so much. I would say your commissioners have in front of them a very important decision. Fortunately, they have complete authority to make this decision. I like the way the meeting began, was be respectful with those that disagree with you. Talk respectfully and productively with your commissioners. Meet with them personally when you can. That's what the wind developers do. Most of the time when you get to a meeting, the developers didn't wait for the public meetings to have all their discussions. They've been meeting with their commissioners or supervisors or trustees for a year or more, and the folks didn't even know. One of the gals who was a great activist in central Michigan would call up her official and say, I'd like 30 minutes of your time. Do you want a beer or coffee? I'll bring either one. And then she would go sit and talk with them. Talk with those folks. Let them know your concerns. It sounds to me like you've been doing exactly that. I do believe your officials are committed to doing what's in your best interest. You have to give them the benefit of the doubt, but talk to them. Bring them along, explain your concerns. Generally, good folks will pay attention to that. And finally, I will leave you with one question and one you can ask Apex. Because in my township, 36 square miles, we had 2 developers, UV Wind, JUWI, a German company, which claimed to be the Midwest premier wind developer. Never heard of them since, but they were the premier then. And the other was John Deere, which then was bought by Exelon. So as a result, we got to hear all sides of these, and we had competing claims. Or I'll share this one anecdote before I close. We heard testimony from Exelon and UV about noise and setbacks recommendations. UV said 55 decibels and a 1,000-foot setback is acceptable. Exelon's expert, Peter Goldberg from Boston, he said 45 decibels and 1,320 feet is the right setback and noise limit. I say, okay, I'm a planning commissioner, I'm hearing these two things, so I said to this acoustic expert, are you prepared to say that the 1,000-foot setback and the 55 decibels just recommended by your competitor is unsafe? He said, yes, I am. I thought, oh my, we have an honest broker here. It wasn't 2 or 3 months later that the same guy that pronounced 55 and 1,000 feet unsafe went to Mason County, where he signed off on turbines being sited under 1,000 feet to people's homes and at a noise level much higher. Shall we say that wind energy experts are, if nothing else, flexible? I was involved in a case in Montana, and there was a court proceeding, and they accused me of being funded, which I'm not. Look, I have had a 6-figure impact from my wind energy education over the last 10 years, but it's minus $100,000 over the last 10 years. It's not to the plus. It came out in court transcript that Dr. Chris Olson, who works for a lot of wind companies, had written a paper for Pattern Energy in Montana where they wanted to build 12 or 2 dozen wind turbines on the banks of the Yellowstone River in the name of the environment. It's also the first time that the plaintiffs in the case arguably had more money than the wind company. That was unique. But it came out that Dr. Olson had received $50,000 to write one paper. $50,000. Can you imagine that? Again, you'll never get the truth from a person whose paycheck depends upon not knowing the truth. So, all that being said, you've heard the claims of the developers. What I said to UV Wind at one early meeting was, you've assured us that these won't cause substantial harm to birds, won't cause substantial harm to bats, won't adversely affect our property values, won't affect our sleep, won't become a general nuisance. If none of those claims turn out to be true, are you prepared to stand behind those statements tonight financially? And he says, we are not prepared to make that commitment tonight. What else do we need to know? It's impossible to argue with people who have $100 bills stuffed in their ears. So I wish you all good luck.
Yep, quickly. One more speaker.
I just want to make a comment. You started, Kevin, you started in 2008 or 9, and I believe he was told by the wind people that the wind turbines then are a lot quieter than the older ones. I was told in 2016, or our township officials, the wind turbines today are a lot quieter than those older ones from 2009 and 10. And I'm in Montcalm County on the other side of the state of Michigan now, and they're saying, well, those 650 footers are a lot quieter than those ones from 2016. You hear the same thing no matter where you go, no matter which company it is and what wind turbine we're talking about.
Which means if they continue on that glide path of technological advancement, we're only 1 or 2 generations away from wind turbines actually sucking noise out of the environment.
He took my script. Okay, so we have one last speaker that's going to speak tonight, and she's a little bit, we really appreciate you guys coming from Missouri and Michigan to give your firsthand accounts, so we really appreciate that. We do have one last speaker that's going to talk closer to home. She's going to be talking about the actual Apex Honey Creek Wind Project and kind of where we're at here in Crawford County. While she's getting set up, I want to address the meeting that is going to happen, or the hearing that's going to happen next Thursday. If you have not heard The county commissioners will be conducting or hosting a hearing here at the youth building next Thursday, the 21st at 1 p.m. Some things have changed with that meeting, and that hearing is for you to voice, your feelings on this project, your concerns. And it's very important that you do that. They need to hear from us. Even if it's just standing up and saying, this is not a right fit for my community, or, I do not want this. You can talk up to 3 minutes. There's a 3-minute limit. But one of the things that changed today that I need to make sure that you're aware of, and please spread the word, please educate others, is that you have to fill out a form, and that form has to be turned in prior to the hearing beginning. So if you arrive at 1:30, at this point, you would not be able to speak unless you got that form in prior to the meeting starting at 1.
Where do you get the form?
We have those forms. Thank you, good question. We have those forms at the back table. Becky, you want to wave? Somebody want to wave back there? Okay, Candy's got them. We have those forms. It's just a quick name, address, form that you can fill out tonight, and we will be glad to hand those in for you before 1 o'clock. So if you think you might want to speak, please fill those out and be here next Thursday at 1 o'clock. The other thing that we found out was that they are going to limit the hearing till 2:30. So it starts at 1 and it's going to end at 2:30. I'm sorry, 3:30. Thank
There are
you.
county commissioners, they should stay here until the last person has spoken.
Unfortunately, and we have voiced that concern today, and that is going to be taken back to the commissioners tomorrow to see if that will be changed. This is something that's hot off the press, just happened today.
We're here until the next morning, we're here until the next morning.
Right. We would like everyone to be able to have a voice. Now, you can always submit written testimony if you'd like. But yeah, I think that us being able to actually voice our opinion would be best. So we're hoping they're going to change their mind on that one. We will see. The other thing, the other thing that changed. Oh, the other thing that changed about that meeting is that the meeting will open with a presentation by Apex on what the project entails. And we've been told that presentation is going to be limited to 10 minutes. Are we happy about that? No, not really. But once again, like I said, and I'm eating my own words here, once again, I urge you that when someone else at that meeting is presenting, and it is a different view than what yours is, please be respectful. We will look really bad if we are, making our moans and groans that we all want to make, okay? But we've got to keep those to ourselves during that meeting, so we take kind of the higher road. But just so that you know, those are changes that are hot off the press, and we have voiced our displeasure in those changes. Those are being taken back to the commissioners tomorrow, but I wanted to let you know what's going on there. But it's very important that, if you can, please inform, educate people, and if you can attend that meeting, it's very important that you do that. It's also still very important that we get signatures on petitions. So once again, I beg of you, if you are willing to go door to door, or you know someone that likes going and talking